The scorching afternoon sun beat down on Katherine Davis's weathered hands as she gripped the eviction notice, her heart sinking faster than a stone in a well. The year was 1885, and the Lazy D Ranch, her family's legacy for 3 generations in Williams, Arizona territory, was slipping through her fingers like desert sand. "You have 30 days, Miss Davis," Mr. Harrington, the bank manager, had informed her with practiced indifference. "The drought has affected many ranches in the territory, but your father's outstanding loans have accrued substantial interest. I'm afraid there's no other recourse." Katherine stood on her porch now, the mountains of northern Arizona painted in hues of amber and rust behind her as she stared at the once thriving cattle ranch that had withered under the relentless sun. At 24, she never imagined she'd be facing this alone. Her father had died 6 months ago. Pneumonia had claimed him after a bitter winter, leaving Katherine with a struggling ranch and debts she hadn't known existed. She folded the notice carefully, tucking it into her apron pocket. The ranch hands had already left, unable to work for promises instead of pay. All that remained was old Hank, who'd been with her family since before she was born, and Maria, who ran the household with quiet efficiency. "Miss Katherine," Maria called from the doorway, "supper's ready." Katherine nodded, not trusting her voice. She would tell them tomorrow about the bank's decision. Tonight she needed to gather her courage and come to terms with the inevitable: she would have to sell. The following morning brought no comfort. Katherine saddled her mare, Penny, and rode the boundaries of the Lazy D one last time. The cattle, once numbering in the hundreds, had dwindled to less than 40 head. The creek that fed their land had shrunk to a trickle in the prolonged drought, and the grazing pastures had thinned to dust and scattered clumps of hardy weeds. As she crested the ridge overlooking the north pasture, Katherine noticed a rider approaching from the direction of town. The stranger sat tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the sun. Katherine tensed. Visitors were rare and rarely brought good news. She guided Penny down the slope, meeting the stranger where the trail widened near the boundary fence. Up close, she could see he was young, perhaps a few years older than herself, with shoulders broadened by hard work and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, strikingly blue against his tanned skin, regarded her with frank curiosity. "Madam," he tipped his hat. "I'm looking for the owner of this ranch." "You found her," Katherine replied, lifting her chin. "Katherine Davis of the Lazy D." Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by respect. "Benjamin Marshall," he introduced himself. "I've just arrived from Texas." "Heard there might be work in these parts." Katherine gave a humorless laugh. "I'm afraid you've wasted your journey, Mr. Marshall. This ranch isn't hiring. In fact, it won't even be standing in a month's time." His brow furrowed. "Begging your pardon, but this looks like good land, despite the drought." "It is good land," she replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "But good land means nothing without water or money, and I'm short on both." Benjamin Marshall studied her for a long moment, then dismounted with fluid grace. "Miss Davis, I don't mean to pry, but I've seen ranches in worse shape recover. Perhaps you just need another perspective." Katherine almost dismissed him outright, but hesitated. There was something in his direct gaze that spoke of honesty and competence, qualities she'd learned to recognize from her father. "Mr. Marshall, unless your perspective comes with $3,000 to pay the bank, I don't see how it helps me." "3,000, he whistled low. "That's a considerable sum. My father borrowed against the ranch during the last drought. He never recovered, and now—" She gestured to the barren landscape. Benjamin's eyes scanned the property, noting the empty corrals, the sagging fence lines, the barn in need of repair. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a warm, genuine expression that transformed his face. "Miss Davis, I've spent my life turning around struggling ranches. My father taught me every trick in the book for surviving hard times." He took a step toward her, determination evident in his stance. "We'll save it together." Katherine stared at him, bewildered. Mr. Marshall, we've only just met. Why would you involve yourself in my problems?" "Call me Ben," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "And I'm involving myself because I know what it means to lose a family legacy. My father's ranch was taken by the railroad 5 years ago. I couldn't save it then, but I've learned plenty since." Katherine dismounted, regarding him warily. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Ben? A partnership of sorts. I have some savings, not nearly enough to cover your debt, mind you, but combined with my labor and knowledge, we might just save this place. And what would you want in return? Half my ranch, Catherine's voice hardened. Ben shook his head. A fair wage if we succeed, and the satisfaction of beating the banks at their own game. I've been looking for a place to put down roots, Miss Davis. I'm not asking for ownership, just a chance to help and maybe, eventually, find a home here. Catherine studied him, searching for signs of deception. Finding none, she sighed. Come to the house. We can discuss this further, though I warn you it's likely hopeless. I don't believe in hopeless situations, Miss Davis, Ben replied, gathering his horse's reins, only in people who give up too soon. As they walked their horses back to the ranch house, Catherine found herself wondering if Benjamin Marshall was a miracle or a mirage in the desert heat. Either way, he was offering something she desperately needed: hope. The kitchen table at the Lazy D became their war room. Catherine spread out the ranch ledgers, property maps, and the bank notice while Ben studied them with intense concentration. Hank and Maria hovered nearby, their expressions cautiously optimistic at the arrival of this strange savior. Your father kept detailed records, Ben observed, flipping through the ledger. That's good. We can see exactly where things went wrong. Catherine nodded. Pa was meticulous about his bookkeeping, if not his borrowing habits. Ben's finger traced a column of figures. The drought 4 years ago hit you hard, then cattle prices dropped the following year. He looked up. But before that, this was a profitable operation. It was, Catherine confirmed. We ran over 300 heads, supplied beef to the Army at Fort Whipple, and even shipped to California. Ben nodded thoughtfully. The fundamentals are still sound: land, location, experience. He pointed to the property map. What's this area here along the eastern boundary? The old creek bed. It dried up 2 summers ago when the Wilcox Ranch upstream diverted water for their fields. Ben's eyes narrowed. Did they have water rights to do that? Catherine shrugged. Pa never fought it. He was already ill by then, and the Wilcox family has connections in the territorial government. Water theft is still theft, Ben muttered, but we'll come back to that. First, we need to buy time with the bank. Mr. Harrington was quite clear about the 30-day deadline, Catherine said. Banks care about one thing: getting their money back. If we can make a partial payment and show a viable plan for the rest, they might extend the deadline. And where would we get money for even a partial payment? Catherine asked. Ben reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. He emptied its contents onto the table: gold coins and carefully folded bills. $842, he said. My life savings. It's not enough to clear your debt, but it might be enough to show good faith. Catherine stared at the money, then at Ben, shocked by the gesture. I can't accept this. You don't even know me. I'm not giving it to you, Ben clarified. I'm investing it in our partnership. If we fail, I lose it all. If we succeed, I earn it back with interest. What makes you so sure we can succeed? Ben's expression turned serious. Because you haven't given up yet, despite everything. That kind of determination is worth betting on. Catherine felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the ranch's problems. This man, this stranger who had appeared like an answer to an unspoken prayer, was looking at her with a confidence she hadn't felt in years. All right, she said at last. We'll try it your way, Mr. Marshall, but I want everything in writing: a proper contract that protects what remains of my ranch. Ben grinned. I wouldn't expect anything less, Miss Davis, and please, it's Ben. Then I suppose you should call me Catherine. The first week of their partnership was a whirlwind of activity. Ben rode into town the very next day with Catherine to meet with Mr. Harrington at the Williams Bank. The bank manager, a thin man with perpetually ink-stained fingers, was initially dismissive of their proposal. Miss Davis, the bank has already been more than generous with extensions, he said, barely glancing at Ben. Your father's debt has been outstanding for nearly 2 years. We understand that, Mr. Harrington, Ben interjected smoothly, and we're prepared to make a good faith payment today. He placed his pouch on the desk. Harrington's eyebrows rose as he counted the money. $800 is hardly sufficient to cover the interest, let alone the principal. It's a start, Catherine said firmly, and we have a plan to pay the remainder within 6 months. 6 months. Harrington scoffed. The bank expects full payment in 30 days. The bank wants its money, Ben pointed out, and you'll get more of it if you give us time to restore the ranch's operations than if you force a sale in this market. Harrington's eyes narrowed. And who exactly are you, Mr. Marshall? A partner in the Lazy D. I've managed successful ranch turnarounds in Texas and Colorado. He has experience I lack, Katherine added. Together, we can make the ranch profitable again. Harrington leaned back in his chair, considering. I'll need to discuss this with the bank's directors. In the meantime, I'll accept this payment against your debt. Return in 3 days for our answer. As they left the bank, Katherine exhaled slowly. Do you think he'll agree? Ben nodded. Banks hate foreclosures, they're expensive and messy. If we've shown them a better option, they'll take it. They spent the next 3 days working from dawn until dusk. Ben inspected every inch of the property, identifying immediate needs and opportunities. Katherine was impressed by his practical knowledge and tireless energy. Your south pasture could support at least 30 more head with proper rotation, he observed as they rode the boundary. And this broken fence line, we fix it, and you'll save on lost cattle. Katherine watched him dismount to examine the fence post. You really do know ranching. Ben smiled up at her. Born and raised on a cattle ranch outside of San Antonio, my father could tell a cow's weight within 5 pounds just by looking at it, and my mother could stretch a dollar further than anyone I've known. What happened to them? Katherine asked softly. Ben's smile faded. Mother died of fever when I was 14. Father held on until the railroad came through. They wanted our land for a new line, offered a price that was an insult. When Pa refused, they found ways to make life impossible, cutting off our water access, blocking cattle drives to market. Eventually, they took it through some legal maneuvering I still don't fully understand. I'm sorry, Katherine said, recognizing the same pain she carried. Ben shrugged, but she could see it still hurt him. Life goes on. Pa died a year later, heart just gave out. I've been working other people's ranches ever since, learning everything I could, saving every penny. And now you're spending those pennies on my problems, Katherine observed. I'm investing in a future, Ben corrected, remounting his horse. Something my pa always wanted me to have. When they returned to the bank 3 days later, Harrington grudgingly presented them with new terms. They would have 6 months to pay the remaining debt, with monthly interest payments to demonstrate good faith. This is highly irregular, he warned them. If you miss even one payment, foreclosure proceedings will begin immediately. We understand, Katherine said, signing the new agreement with steady hands. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Harrington. Outside on the boardwalk, Ben released a whoop that turned heads up and down the street. First battle won, Miss Davis. Katherine couldn't help but laugh at his enthusiasm. We still have a war ahead of us, Mr. Marshall. True enough, he agreed, suddenly serious. But now we have time to fight it properly. Back at the ranch, they gathered around the kitchen table again, this time to outline their strategy for the months ahead. We need immediate income, Ben said. That means selling some of your remaining cattle to make the first interest payment. Katherine nodded reluctantly. I was hoping to build the herd, not reduce it further. Sometimes you have to step back to move forward. We'll sell 15 head, the oldest steers, and keep the breeding stock. That should cover 2 months of payments while we implement other plans. What other plans? Hank asked, speaking up for the first time. The old ranch hand had been silently evaluating Ben since his arrival. Ben spread out the property map. 3 things will save this ranch: water, diversification, and community. He pointed to the dry creek bed. First, we're going to challenge the Wilcox water diversion. Katherine's father may have let it go, but we won't. Water rights in the territory follow prior appropriation, first in time, first in right. The Lazy D was established before the Wilcox Ranch. The Wilcox family won't take that lying down, Hank warned. No, they won't, Ben agreed. But they're counting on intimidation, not law. Meanwhile, we'll dig a new well near the main house and implement water conservation measures throughout the property. Diversification, Maria prompted. Cattle alone is too risky in drought country, Ben explained. We'll add horses, good stock that can be trained and sold to the army or stagecoach companies. We'll also plant drought-resistant crops in the north, field beans and corn that we can sell or use ourselves. Katherine was impressed by the comprehensive plan, but puzzled by his last point. What do you mean by community? Ben's eyes lit up. The Lazy D has been isolated too long. We need to reconnect with Williams and the surrounding ranches, share resources, labor, equipment. Host a community gathering to remind people of this ranch's importance to the area. A social, Maria asked, already looking excited by the prospect. Exactly, Ben confirmed. People help neighbors they know and like. We need to become indispensable to this community again. Katherine considered his words. Her father had been a proud man who believed in self-reliance above all else. As his illness progressed, he had withdrawn further from town affairs, cementing their isolation. It's a good plan, she acknowledged. Ambitious, but good. Ben met her eyes across the table. We can do this, Katherine, together. Something in his steady gaze made her believe him. The following weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Ben helped Katherine drive 15 steers to market in Flagstaff, where they fetched a fair price enough to make the first 2 interest payments to the bank with a little left over for immediate repairs. Upon their return, they implemented Ben's water management plan, starting with the well. It was backbreaking work, digging through rocky soil under the Arizona sun, but Ben never complained. Katherine worked alongside him, surprising herself with her own strength and endurance. My father would be shocked to see me like this, she confessed one evening as they rested on the porch, watching the sunset paint the distant peaks. He believed a lady should supervise, not sweat. Ben chuckled, passing her a cup of coffee. My mother could outwork most men, and she was the finest lady I ever knew. Worth isn't measured in clean hands, Katherine. She studied him in the fading light, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle respect in his voice when he spoke of his mother. In just a few weeks, Ben Marshall had transformed from stranger to what partner, certainly, friend perhaps, but there was something else growing between them, something Katherine wasn't quite ready to name. Their first major challenge came in the form of Thomas Wilcox, who rode onto the Lazy D property one morning, flanked by 2 hired hands. Katherine was in the barn, brushing down Penny when she heard the commotion. Marshall, Wilcox bellowed, show yourself, you interfering son of a bitch. Katherine hurried outside to find Ben already facing down the visitors, his stance casual but alert. Thomas Wilcox was a heavy-set man in his 40s, with a florid face and expensive clothes that marked him as one of the territory's wealthy ranchers. Mr. Wilcox, Ben greeted him calmly. What brings you to the Lazy D? You know damn well what brings me here, Wilcox snarled. I received notice from the Territorial Water Commissioner that you're challenging my water usage. Not challenging, correcting, Ben replied. The Lazy D has senior water rights on Cottonwood Creek. Your diversion dam is illegal, Wilcox's face darkened. That creek runs through my property. After it passes through ours, Katherine interjected, moving to stand beside Ben. The law is clear on this, Mr. Wilcox. You can use the water after it passes our boundary, but not before. Wilcox turned his glare on her. Your father understood how things work in this territory, Miss Davis. It seems you need a similar education. Ben stepped forward, his easy manner hardening. That sounds remarkably like a threat, Mr. Wilcox. I'd advise against making it. The tension crackled between them. One of Wilcox's men shifted in his saddle, his hand drifting toward his holstered revolver. Hank appeared from the side of the barn, a shotgun held casually but visibly. Wilcox assessed the situation and apparently decided against escalation for the moment. The commissioner hasn't ruled yet, Marshal. When he does, you'll find that influence speaks louder than dusty legal precedents. Perhaps, Ben acknowledged, but the territorial governor might be interested to learn how that influence is being applied. I've taken the liberty of writing to his office as well. Surprise and fury warred on Wilcox's face. He jerked his horse around. This isn't over. No, Ben agreed quietly. It's just beginning. They watched the 3 riders depart in a cloud of dust. Katherine released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That man has powerful friends, she warned. So do we, Ben replied. We just haven't met them all yet. The confrontation with Wilcox accelerated their timeline for community outreach. Ben suggested they host a barn raising and social the following weekend, inviting neighboring ranchers and townspeople from Williams. A barn raising? Katherine questioned. Our barn is still standing. The old hay storage isn't, Ben pointed out. And a community project gives people a stake in our success. Katherine was skeptical but agreed to the plan. Maria enthusiastically took charge of the food preparations, while Ben and Hank rode to surrounding ranches with invitations. Katherine placed a notice in the Williams newspaper, feeling a mixture of hope and dread at opening their struggling ranch to public scrutiny. To her amazement, people came. By mid-morning on Saturday, wagons and riders began arriving at the Lazy D. Families brought food to share, men brought tools, and even the town doctor made an appearance, claiming he was just passing by. The old hay storage had been cleared in preparation, and under Ben's direction, teams of men began raising the new structure. Women set up tables under shade trees. Children played impromptu games of tag, and for the first time in years, the Lazy D rang with laughter and conversation. Katherine found herself drawn into discussions with neighboring ranchers' wives, many of whom remembered her mother fondly. Several offered seeds from their gardens for the Lazy D's new crop fields, along with advice about what grew best in the harsh conditions. "Your young man has good ideas," Mrs. Thornton, wife of a rancher 5 miles west, commented. "Not many would think to combine cattle and crop farming in these parts." "He's not my young man," Katherine corrected automatically. "Just a business partner." Mrs. Thornton's knowing smile made Katherine flush. "If you say so, dear, but I haven't seen Robert Jenkins look so worried in years." "Robert Jenkins?" Katherine asked, confused. "From the mercantile. He's been sweet on you since you were both in school, though he's never worked up the courage to court you properly. Now he's watching your business partner like a hawk watches a field mouse." Katherine glanced across the yard to where Robert stood, indeed looking unhappy as he observed Ben directing the barn raising. The thought that anyone might be jealous over her attention was so unexpected that Katherine nearly laughed aloud. By late afternoon, the new hay storage stood complete, and the celebration shifted to a proper social. Someone produced a fiddle, another a harmonica, and soon music filled the air. Tables groaned under the weight of shared dishes, stews, biscuits, pies, and more preserves than Katherine had seen in one place since her mother's time. Ben found her as the sun began its descent, his shirt dusty from work but his eyes bright with satisfaction. "Quite a turnout," he remarked, accepting a cup of lemonade from her. "I count representatives from at least 8 ranches plus half the businesses in Williams." "It's incredible," Katherine admitted. "I didn't think anyone would remember us." "People remember kindness," Ben said. "Your father might have withdrawn in later years, but from what I've heard today, the Davis family has a long history of helping neighbors. That's a valuable legacy." Before Katherine could respond, the Territorial Water Commissioner himself approached them, a slight man named Parker whom Katherine recognized from town council meetings. "Miss Davis, Mr. Marshall," he greeted them. "Impressive gathering." "Mr. Parker," Ben acknowledged with a nod. "We're grateful you could attend." "I was curious," Parker admitted. "The Wilcox complaint crossed my desk yesterday." Katherine tensed, and Parker sipped his drink before answering. "Thomas Wilcox is an influential man in the territory. His brother-in-law sits on the banking commission in Prescott. The law is clear regarding water rights," Ben stated calmly. "Indeed it is," Parker agreed. "Which is why I've already ordered the removal of the Wilcox diversion dam. It should be dismantled within the week." Katherine gasped. "Really?" Parker smiled thinly. "Contrary to Mr. Wilcox's belief, influence has limits, particularly when other influential parties take an interest." "What other parties?" Ben asked. Parker gestured around the gathering. "Judge Holbrook over there is no friend of the Wilcox family. Neither is Territorial Representative Wilson, who I noticed brought his family today, and several of these ranchers have their own grievances with Wilcox water practices." He finished his lemonade. A wise man recognizes when the winds are shifting. As Parker moved away to join another conversation, Katherine turned to Ben in amazement. "Did you arrange this?" Ben shook his head, looking equally surprised. "I just sent the invitations, the rest." He gestured to the lively gathering. "This is all your family's reputation at work." As evening approached, lanterns were lit around the yard and the dancing began in earnest. Katherine found herself swept into a Virginia reel, partnered with various neighbors and townsmen. Each time she circled back to Ben, her pulse quickened at his warm smile. When the musicians finally struck up a waltz, Ben appeared at her side, hand extended in invitation. "May I have this dance, Miss Davis?" Katherine accepted with a nod, suddenly shy as his hand settled at her waist. They moved together easily, as if they'd been dancing for years rather than minutes. "This day has been a miracle," Katherine confessed as they circled the makeshift dance floor. "I never thought I'd see the Lazy D like this again." "It's just the beginning," Ben promised. "With the water rights settled and these community connections re-established, we're on our way." "Because of you," she said softly. "I was ready to give up before you arrived." Ben's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "You give me too much credit. The strength was always here in the land, in your history, in you. I just helped you remember it." Katherine looked up into his eyes, finding something there that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might bend down to kiss her, right there amidst their neighbors and friends. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently and continued their dance, leaving Katherine with a curious mixture of disappointment and anticipation. As the last guests departed late that night, Katherine stood on the porch watching the twinkling lanterns of wagons disappear into the darkness. Ben joined her, his presence both familiar and exhilarating after the events of the day. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Ben turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. Katherine, whatever he intended to say was interrupted by Maria, who appeared at the door with a pot of coffee. "You two must be exhausted. Come inside before you collapse." The moment broken, they followed Maria inside, exchanging a glance that promised continuation of whatever had begun between them. With the water commissioners ruling in their favor, life at the Lazy D transformed rapidly. Within days of the Wilcox Dam being removed, water began flowing again in the old creek bed. It wasn't the strong flow of years past the drought still held the land in its grip, but it was enough to begin rejuvenating the eastern pastures. Ben's diversification plan progressed as well. They planted 10 acres of drought-resistant beans and corn, utilizing techniques Ben had learned from farmers in West Texas. Katherine took charge of this aspect of the ranch, discovering she had a knack for agriculture that surprised even herself. "My mother kept a kitchen garden," she explained to Ben as they walked the neat rows one evening. "I used to help her as a child before she passed. I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed watching things grow." The horse training program began with the purchase of 4 promising yearlings from a breeder in Flagstaff. Ben had an eye for good horseflesh and a gentle hand with training. Soon, word spread about the quality stock at the Lazy D, bringing potential buyers to their gates. By the 3rd month of their partnership, they had made all scheduled payments to the bank and were beginning to show a small profit. The ranch hands who had departed earlier began to return, drawn by steady work and fair treatment. The Lazy D was coming back to life. Their success did not go unnoticed or unchallenged. Thomas Wilcox, humiliated by his defeat over water rights, found other ways to create obstacles. Supplies Katherine ordered from the mercantile mysteriously became unavailable. Cattle buyers who had expressed interest suddenly withdrew their offers. The stagecoach line, partially owned by Wilcox interests, refused to consider the Lazy D horses for their teams. "He's trying to strangle us commercially," Ben observed grimly after another buyer failed to appear for a scheduled meeting. "What can we do?" Katherine asked. "Go bigger," Ben decided. "If Wilcox can influence local buyers, we'll find markets beyond his reach." The opportunity came in the form of a government contract. The Army at Fort Whipple was seeking new suppliers for both beef and horses. The bid process was competitive, but Ben prepared a meticulous proposal, highlighting the Lazy D's history of quality and reliability. When the letter arrived confirming they had secured a small initial contract, Katherine hugged Ben impulsively, caught up in the excitement. He returned the embrace, lifting her briefly off her feet in celebration. When he set her down, they remained close, his hands still at her waist, hers on his shoulders. "We did it," she whispered, aware of how intimate they suddenly appeared. "You did it," Ben corrected softly. "This is your ranch, your legacy." "Our achievement," Katherine insisted. "I couldn't have done this without you, Ben." Something shifted in his expression, a decision made, a barrier lowered. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When Katherine responded, rising on her toes to press more firmly against him, the kiss deepened into something that left them both breathless. When they finally separated, Ben rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the barn raising," he admitted. "I've wanted you to," Katherine confessed, surprising herself with her boldness. They might have continued, but Hank's approaching footsteps forced them apart. The old ranch hand pretended not to notice their flushed faces as he delivered a message about a fence repair needing attention. Ben excused himself to handle the matter, leaving Katherine to touch her lips wonderingly, marveling at how completely her life had changed in just 3 months. That evening they sat together on the porch swing, fingers intertwined as they discussed the future. The night was cool, the stars brilliant above the Arizona landscape. "The Army contract changes everything," Ben said. "It's steady income, respected clientele. Wilcox can't touch it. And when the 6 months are up?" Katherine asked, the question that had been hovering between them finally voiced. "What happens then?" Ben turned to face her, his expression earnest in the lamplight from the window. "That depends on you, Katherine. I came here looking for work and found so much more." "What are you saying, Ben?" He took both her hands in his. "I'm saying I love you. I've tried to be professional, to focus on saving the ranch first, but I can't pretend anymore. I want to build a future here with you if you'll have me." Katherine's heart thundered in her chest. "What kind of future?" "Marriage," he said simply. "A partnership in every sense. Your ranch would remain yours. I'd never ask you to give up your inheritance. But I'd be by your side, working this land, raising a family, growing old together on the porch of this very house." Tears welled in Katherine's eyes. "Ben Marshall, are you proposing to me?" "Inelegantly, but yes," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "I don't have a ring yet or your father to ask for permission. All I have is my heart, my hands, and my promise to love you for all my days." Katherine launched herself into his arms, nearly toppling the swing. "Yes," she whispered against his neck. "Yes, I'll marry you." Ben held her tightly, his own voice thick with emotion. "You've made me the happiest man in the Arizona territory." Their engagement news spread quickly through the ranch and into Williams. Maria wept happy tears. Hank slapped Ben on the back with gruff congratulations, and the remaining ranch hands organized an impromptu celebration. In town, reactions were mixed: genuine well wishes from most, thinly veiled disappointment from Robert Jenkins at the Mercantile, and cold fury from Thomas Wilcox when he heard the news at the saloon. "This changes nothing," Wilcox was overheard saying to his companions. "The Davis girl and her drifter still owe the bank. One contract won't save them." His words proved prophetic, though not in the way he intended. 2 weeks after their engagement, disaster struck. A lightning storm ignited a wildfire in the hills above the Lazy D, and shifting winds drove it rapidly toward their northern pastures, directly where their newly planted crops were flourishing. The entire ranch mobilized to fight the fire. Men from neighboring properties arrived to help, forming bucket lines and digging fire breaks. Katherine worked alongside everyone else, her face blackened with soot, her arms aching from carrying water. Ben led a team to move the cattle and horses to safety, then returned to coordinate the firefighting efforts. For hours, they battled the relentless flames, watching as years of drought-dried vegetation fueled the inferno. By dawn, the fire was contained, but the damage was extensive. The north field crops were destroyed, several outbuildings lost, and a section of fence had burned, allowing some cattle to scatter into the surrounding countryside. Worse, their hay reserves for winter feed had been significantly depleted. Katherine and Ben surveyed the damage as the sun rose, exhaustion evident in their slumped shoulders. "We can recover from this," Ben insisted, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "The Army contract is still intact. We'll replant what we can." Katherine nodded, trying to share his optimism. At least no one was hurt. Buildings and crops can be replaced, but the financial impact was severe. The lost crops represented a significant portion of their diversification strategy. The scattered cattle would take time and manpower to recover, resources they could ill afford to spare. And replanting so late in the season was a gamble at best. When they returned to the main house, Mr. Harrington from the bank was waiting for them. His expression as he surveyed their soot-stained appearance and the smoldering landscape beyond suggested no sympathy. "Miss Davis, Mr. Marshall," he greeted them formally. "I've come to assess the situation following the fire. How did you hear about it so quickly?" Katherine asked, too tired for pleasantries. "Mr. Wilcox informed the bank early this morning," Harrington replied. As a major depositor, he expressed concern about the bank's investment here. Ben's jaw tightened. "Of course he did." Harrington produced a document from his satchel. "Given the circumstances, the bank's directors have voted to accelerate your payment schedule. The full remaining balance is now due within 30 days. "That's impossible," Katherine protested. "Our agreement was for 6 months." "The agreement included provisions for reassessment in case of significant property damage," Harrington pointed out coldly. "The fire qualifies." "This is Wilcox's doing," Ben said flatly. "He's using the bank to finish what he couldn't accomplish through intimidation." Harrington's expression didn't change. "The bank's decision is final, Mr. Marshall. 30 days. He handed the document to Katherine and departed without another word. When he was gone, Katherine sank into a kitchen chair, the paper clutched in her trembling hands. "We were so close," she whispered. Ben knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "This isn't over, Katherine. We still have options." "What options? We've lost the crops, the cattle are scattered, and we've just spent what reserves we had fighting the fire." Despair crept into her voice. "Maybe Wilcox was right. One contract wasn't enough." "Listen to me," Ben said firmly. "Your father built this ranch from nothing. You fought to save it against impossible odds. We are not giving up now." Katherine looked into his determined face, drawing strength from his conviction. "What do we do?" "First we sleep," he decided pragmatically. "We've been up all night, then we gather our people and make a new plan." By afternoon, rested if not refreshed, they assembled everyone in the main house. Hank, Maria, and the remaining ranch hands listened as Ben outlined their situation and their options. "We need $2,000 in 30 days, he stated bluntly. "The Army contract will bring in 500 at most in that time frame. We can sell some of the horses we were training, but that's another 300 at current prices." "What about a loan from another bank?" one of the hands suggested. Ben shook his head. "With Wilcox's influence, no local bank will touch us. And we don't have time to seek financing from Prescott or Phoenix." "We could sell part of the land," Hank suggested reluctantly. "Keep the core operation and let go of the northern section." Katherine considered this, pain evident in her expression. "That might work, but who would buy it quickly enough? And once we start parceling out the ranch?" "It would never end," Ben finished for her. "And it's exactly what Wilcox wants to break up the Lazy D piece by piece." Silence fell over the room as the gravity of their situation settled on everyone's shoulders. Then Maria, who had been quiet throughout, spoke up. "What about the map?" she asked, all eyes turned to her. "What map?" Katherine asked. "Your father's map," Maria clarified. "The one he kept in his Bible. He always said it was the ranch's insurance policy." Katherine frowned. "I don't know what you're talking about, Maria. What insurance policy?" Maria rose and went to the bookshelf, retrieving a worn family Bible. From between its pages, she extracted a yellowed piece of paper, carefully folded. "He made me promise never to mention it unless there was no other choice," she explained, handing the paper to Katherine. "He said it was a secret that could save the ranch or destroy it." Katherine unfolded the paper with Ben looking over her shoulder. It was a crude map of the Lazy D property, with an X marked in the far eastern corner, near the base of a distinctive rock formation. Accompanying notes in her father's handwriting provided cryptic directions. "I don't understand," Katherine said. "What is this supposed to be?" Hank leaned forward, studying the map. "That's Rattlesnake Ridge," he identified the marked location. "Rough country, hardly good for anything." "Your father would ride out there sometimes," Maria said. "Alone." He never explained why. Ben studied the map intently. These markings, they could indicate a mine shaft. "A mine?" Katherine looked at him in surprise. "There's no mine on our property." "Not officially," Ben said thoughtfully, "but this region has a history of small gold deposits." "If your father found one and kept it secret." Hope flickered across Katherine's face, quickly replaced by skepticism. "If there was gold on our land, why wouldn't he have used it when the ranch was struggling?" "Pride," Hank suggested. "Thomas Davis was a cattleman to his bones." Using gold might have felt like admitting failure at the work he loved. Or he was saving it, Ben proposed. As Maria said, insurance for when there was truly no other option. Katherine stared at the map, conflict evident in her expression. Even if there is something there, mining takes time and equipment we don't have. We don't need a full mining operation, Ben countered, just enough to verify if there's a viable deposit. If there is, we can use that as collateral for a new loan, perhaps even from investors in Prescott who aren't under Wilcox's thumb. Katherine looked around at the faces watching her people who had stuck by the Lazy D through its darkest hours. She took a deep breath. All right. Tomorrow at first light, Ben and I will investigate Rattlesnake Ridge. The ride to Rattlesnake Ridge took most of the morning. The eastern section of the ranch was rugged, largely unsuitable for grazing or farming, which explained why Katherine's father had never developed it. The ridge itself was a jagged outcropping of reddish stone, its base littered with boulders and scrub vegetation. Katherine and Ben dismounted, tethering their horses to a stunted juniper. Ben carried basic prospecting tools, a pick, a shovel, and panning equipment borrowed from a neighboring ranch. According to the map, we should head toward that split rock, Katherine said, pointing to a distinctive formation about halfway up the ridge. They picked their way carefully through the rocky terrain, the summer sun beating down mercilessly. Near the split rock, they began searching for signs of previous activity, disturbed earth, tool marks on stone, anything to indicate her father had worked here. "Katherine, over here," Ben called after about an hour of searching. He was examining a narrow crevice between two boulders, partially hidden by overgrown brush. "This doesn't look natural." Katherine joined him, helping to clear away the vegetation. Behind it, they discovered what was clearly a man-made entrance, a small tunnel reinforced with timber supports. "My father built this," she whispered, recognizing his handiwork in the construction. "He actually had a secret mine." Ben lit a lantern he'd brought and cautiously entered the tunnel, Katherine close behind. The passage descended gently for about 30 feet before opening into a small chamber. Evidence of mining was everywhere, pick marks on the walls, an old wheelbarrow, even a crude sluice box. "Look at this," Ben said softly, holding his lantern toward the far wall. A vein of quartz ran through the rock face, and within it, unmistakable glints of yellow metal caught the light. "Is that?" Katherine breathed. "Gold," Ben confirmed, his voice reverent. "Not a mother lode, but a respectable vein. Your father found himself a genuine gold mine, Katherine." Katherine touched the rock face with trembling fingers. "Why wouldn't he tell me about this?" "Perhaps he was waiting for the right time," Ben suggested. "Or maybe he wanted you to make your own way with the ranch first." They spent the next hour taking samples, using the pick to extract pieces of the gold-bearing quartz. Ben showed Katherine how to test the ore, confirming that the gold content was significant. "This changes everything," he said as they emerged from the tunnel, blinking in the bright sunlight. "With proof of this deposit, we can secure financing that Wilcox can't block. The Lazy D is saved." Katherine looked at the samples they'd collected, then back at the hidden entrance. "We need to be careful, Ben. If word of this gets out before we've secured our position." "You're right," he agreed. "We'll take these samples directly to Prescott tomorrow, bypass Williams completely. I have a contact there, a mining engineer who can provide an official assessment." They carefully concealed the tunnel entrance again before riding back to the ranch house, the precious ore samples secured in Ben's saddlebags. Their spirits were higher than they'd been since the fire, but Katherine still felt a lingering unease. "My father kept this secret for a reason," she said as they rode. "Gold brings trouble, Ben, so does bankruptcy," he countered gently. "We'll be careful, Katherine. This is just a tool to save what really matters, the ranch itself." They arrived back at the main house to find an unexpected visitor waiting, Thomas Wilcox, alone this time, sitting on their porch as if he owned it. "Miss Davis, Marshall," he greeted them with false cordiality. "I was beginning to think you'd abandoned the property already." Ben's hand moved protectively to his saddlebags before he dismounted. "What brings you here, Wilcox?" Wilcox smiled thinly. "Neighborly concern. I heard about your accelerated payment schedule." "How thoughtful," Katherine replied coldly, "especially since you're the one who arranged it." Wilcox shrugged, not bothering to deny the accusation. Business is business, Miss Davis, which is why I'm here with an offer. What kind of offer? Ben asked warily. A fair one, considering your circumstances. Wilcox produced an envelope. I'm prepared to buy the Lazy D lock, stock, and barrel for $1,500, enough to cover most of your debt and give you something to start over elsewhere. Catherine's laugh was bitter. $1,500 for 3,000 acres and all our stock. That's not an offer, Mr. Wilcox, it's theft. It's reality, Wilcox countered. No one else will buy this place in time to save you from foreclosure. I'm offering you a dignified exit. The answer is no, Ben stated firmly. Wilcox's gaze sharpened, moving between them with new calculation. You seem awfully confident for a man watching his fiancée's inheritance crumble. Unless, his eyes fell on Ben's saddlebags, you found another source of funding. The slight shift in Ben's posture was enough to confirm Wilcox's suspicion. The older man's expression hardened. I see. Well, my offer stands until the end of the week. After that, I'll simply wait for the bank to auction the property, likely for even less than I'm offering now. He rose to leave but paused at the steps. Oh, and Marshall, this territory can be dangerous for treasure hunters. Accidents happen in remote areas all the time. The threat hung in the air as Wilcox mounted his horse and rode away. Katherine turned to Ben, fear evident in her eyes. He knows something, she whispered. Ben nodded grimly. Or suspects. Either way, we need to move quickly. We'll leave for Prescott tonight, not tomorrow. They worked rapidly to prepare for the journey. Prescott was a full day's ride, and they would need to travel light and fast. Ben secured the ore samples in a locked box, which he would keep with him at all times. Hank and 2 ranch hands would accompany them as guards. As dusk approached, Maria packed food for their journey while Katherine changed into riding clothes better suited for the long trip. Ben inspected their weapons, his revolver and rifle, Katherine's small derringer that had been her father's. I wish you would stay here, Ben said as they made final preparations. Let me handle this in Prescott. Katherine shook her head firmly. The Lazy D is my responsibility. Besides, the mine is my father's legacy. I need to see this through. Ben's expression softened. You're the strongest woman I've ever known, Katherine Davis. And don't you forget it, Benjamin Marshall, she replied with a small smile. They were nearly ready to depart when the sound of approaching riders caught their attention. Ben moved to the window, rifle ready. It's Wilcox, he reported tensely, and at least 6 men with him. Katherine joined him at the window. In the fading light, she could see Wilcox and his men fanning out around the house, their intentions clearly hostile. Davis, Marshall, Wilcox called out. I know you're planning to leave. Come out and talk terms or we're coming in, Ben turned to Hank. Get Katherine out through the back. Take the samples and head for Prescott. I'll hold them here. No, Katherine protested. I won't leave you. This isn't a discussion, Ben insisted. The ranch needs those samples verified. That's the priority. Before Katherine could argue further, a shot rang out, shattering a window on the far side of the house. The battle had begun. What followed was chaos. Ben and the ranch hands returned fire, keeping Wilcox's men at bay while Hank led Katherine to the back door. They had nearly reached the stables when 2 of Wilcox's men cut them off. Hank fired his shotgun, winging one attacker, but took a bullet to the shoulder in return. Katherine dragged him behind a water trough as bullets splintered the wood around them. Go, Hank gasped, pressing the sample box into her hands. I'll cover you. Katherine hesitated, torn between loyalty and duty. Then, making her decision, she tucked the box securely in her saddlebag and dashed for the nearest horse, not Penny, but a fast gelding already saddled for their journey. As she swung into the saddle, she heard Ben shout her name from the house. Wilcox's men were firing at her now, but Hank's covering shots gave her the seconds she needed. She spurred the gelding hard, crashing through the rear corral fence and into the darkness beyond. Behind her, gunfire continued to echo across the ranch yard. Katherine rode blindly at first, her only thought to put distance between herself and Wilcox's men. But as the initial panic faded, she realized she had a decision to make. Prescott lay to the northeast, the logical destination with the ore samples. But Ben and the others were still fighting at the ranch. The sound of pursuit interrupted her thoughts, hoofbeats pounding behind her. Katherine urged her mount faster, heading for the rocky terrain of the eastern property where she might lose her pursuers. For hours, She played a deadly game of cat and mouse in the darkness, using her knowledge of the land to evade capture. Eventually, the sounds of pursuit faded, and Katherine found herself alone in the night, the stars her only companions. With painful clarity, she realized what she had to do. The samples alone weren't enough. She needed to ensure the mine itself was secured. If Wilcox suspected its existence, he would tear the Lazy D apart looking for it. Katherine turned her horse toward Rattlesnake Ridge. Dawn found her at the hidden mine entrance, exhausted but determined. She secured her horse out of sight and carefully entered the tunnel with a small lantern. Inside, she gathered more samples, as rich as the ones they'd taken earlier. Then, using techniques her father had taught her for ranch emergencies, she prepared to collapse the tunnel entrance, not completely, but enough to hide it from casual discovery. As she worked, placing charges at key structural points, Katherine heard voices outside. Freezing in place, she extinguished her lantern and listened. "The tracks lead this way," a man's voice, one of Wilcox's hired guns. "What the hell would she be doing all the way out here?" another complained. "Wilcox says check everywhere. She has something he wants." Katherine's heart pounded. She was trapped in the tunnel with no way out except past the men searching for her. Silently, she retreated deeper into the mine, feeling her way in the darkness. The voices grew closer, then suddenly one called out, "Hey, look at this, some kind of tunnel." Katherine pressed herself against the cold stone wall, clutching her father's derringer. She would not surrender the mine or the samples. The Lazy D would not fall to Thomas Wilcox. Footsteps entered the tunnel, a lantern's glow illuminating the passage. Katherine held her breath, finger on the trigger. Then, unexpectedly, shots rang out from outside. The man in the tunnel cursed and retreated hastily. More gunfire followed, then shouts and the sound of fighting. "Katherine." A familiar voice called Ben's voice. Relief flooded through her. "In here," she called back. Moments later, Ben appeared at the tunnel entrance, his face dirty and bloodied but wonderfully alive. Behind him stood Judge Holbrook from Williams and several armed men Katherine didn't recognize. "Are you hurt?" Ben asked urgently, rushing to her side. "I'm fine," she assured him, falling into his embrace. "What happened? How did you find me?" "Wilcox's men didn't fare well once the sheriff and his deputies arrived," Ben explained. "Turns out attacking a ranch in the middle of the night is still illegal, even in the Arizona territory." Judge Holbrook stepped forward. "When the shooting started, one of your hands rode for town. The sheriff organized a posse immediately." "And Wilcox?" Katherine asked. "In custody," the judge confirmed. "Along with several of his men, the others fled." "I tracked you here," Ben added. "I knew you'd try to protect the mine." Katherine suddenly remembered the charges she'd set. "We need to get out. I was about to collapse the entrance." They evacuated quickly, Ben disarming Katherine's hasty demolition work once they were safely outside. In the morning light, she could see that he had indeed been in a fight. His clothes were torn, a cut above his eye had bled freely, and he moved stiffly, favoring his left side. "You're hurt," she said, touching his face gently. "Nothing serious," he assured her. "Hank got the worst of it with that shoulder wound, but the doctor says he'll recover. And the ranch? Some bullet holes in the house, a burned stable but otherwise intact." Ben smiled tiredly. "Your home still stands, Katherine." Judge Holbrook cleared his throat. "Miss Davis, Mr. Marshall, I believe you have something to show us." Katherine retrieved the sample box from her saddlebag. "Yes, Your Honor, something my father left to save the ranch." The next few days passed in a whirlwind. The judge arranged for a mining engineer from Prescott to examine both the samples and the mine itself. His assessment confirmed what Katherine and Ben already knew: the deposit was modest but valuable, worth far more than their outstanding bank debt. With the engineer's report in hand, Katherine met with Mr. Harrington and the bank's directors in Williams. The atmosphere was markedly different from their previous encounters. "The bank is prepared to withdraw the accelerated payment schedule," Harrington stated formally. "In light of the verified mineral assets on your property, we would be happy to extend your original terms or even discuss a new arrangement for development capital." "That's very generous," Katherine replied coolly, "particularly since Mr. Wilcox is no longer able to influence your decisions." Harrington had the grace to look uncomfortable. "The bank regrets any appearance of impropriety in its dealings with the Lazy D." "I'm sure," Ben commented dryly. However, we've decided to settle our account in full. He produced a bank draft from a Prescott financial institution. The Lazy D will be conducting its banking business elsewhere in the future. As they left the bank, debt-free for the first time in years, Katherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. I can hardly believe it's over, she said. Not over, Ben corrected, taking her hand. Just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the Lazy D underwent a transformation. With capital from a careful, limited development of the gold deposit, they rebuilt what the fire had damaged and expanded their operations. The Army contract was fulfilled with distinction, leading to larger orders for both beef and horses. Thomas Wilcox faced multiple charges for the attack on the Lazy D. While his family connections protected him from the harshest penalties, his reputation and influence were permanently damaged. The Water Commissioner's ruling was upheld, ensuring the Lazy D's access to Cottonwood Creek remained secure. Katherine and Ben were married that autumn in a ceremony on the ranch, attended by neighbors, friends, and even Mr. Parker, the Water Commissioner who had defied Wilcox's influence. Judge Holbrook performed the ceremony as Katherine's father's Bible was held by a tearful Maria. I, Benjamin Marshall, take you, Katherine Davis, to be my wife, Ben vowed, his voice steady and sure. I promise to stand by your side through drought and plenty, to help shoulder your burdens and celebrate your joys, to build our legacy on this land we've fought to save, and to love you all the days of my life. Katherine, radiant in her mother's restored wedding gown, replied with equal conviction, I, Katherine Davis, take you, Benjamin Marshall, to be my husband. I promise to face each challenge with you as my partner, to never give up when the path grows difficult, to honor the legacy we create together, and to love you completely and faithfully until my last breath. As they exchanged rings, simple bands forged from the first gold extracted from the mine, Ben whispered words only Katherine could hear. We did save it together. Yes, she whispered back, and so much more. 5 years later, Katherine sat on the porch of the Lazy D, watching Ben teach their 3-year-old son, Thomas, to ride his first pony. Their infant daughter, Elizabeth, slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of her heritage as the newest Davis Marshall to call the ranch home. The Lazy D had prospered beyond their wildest dreams. The gold mine, managed responsibly, had provided capital for modernization and expansion. Their cattle operation was now the largest in the county, and their horse breeding program had earned a reputation throughout the territory. The water from Cottonwood Creek, properly conserved and distributed, supported lush pastures and productive fields. Most importantly, the ranch had become a center of community life in Williams. Katherine had established an annual harvest festival that drew people from miles around. Ben had organized a cooperative equipment sharing program among smaller ranchers, building goodwill and resilience throughout the region. As Ben lifted little Thomas onto the pony's back, his patient hands guiding both child and animal, Katherine felt a contentment so deep it brought tears to her eyes. This was what her father had worked for, what she had fought to save, not just land and buildings, but a legacy, a future, a home. Ben looked up, catching her gaze across the yard. His smile, still the same one that had given her hope when all seemed lost, warmed her to her core. He said something to Thomas, then crossed to join her on the porch, sitting beside her and gently touching their daughter's downy head. Happy? He asked simply. Katherine leaned against his shoulder, their family complete, their ranch secure, their love as strong as the land beneath them. Beyond words, she replied. Ben kissed her temple, his arm encircling her shoulders. Together, they watched the sun set over the Lazy D, painting the sky in colors as rich as their shared dreams they had fought for, suffered for, and ultimately, together, made real.